So today, this is going to be difficult because, around this table, I have a difficulty keeping a poker face as it is. But today we have a guest at the round table, and his name is Chris Larsen, and he is the king of... You could just make a facial expression, the way you say something.
Like that one right there.
Yeah, exactly. And my job today is to keep us on track. And so, Chris Larsen, awesome. Thank you for being here.
And I always believe it's not on purpose with him, but it's extremely intentional.
Oh, I mean, if you could actually look in my mind and see all the things I don't say. You think I'm undisciplined in the things I do say. I have so much discipline going on in the things that I just think about, and it's like, that's so inappropriate. I probably shouldn't say that now.
Or ever.
Or ever. Or ever, exactly. There's a lot of or ever.
I just really, just imagine like the eye rolls from Sonny, at home when you do all your dad jokes.
So it was funny because like early on in our relationship, she would laugh and laugh and laugh. And then the older we get and the longer we've been married, it turns into this, oh, please, just stop. Just stop. It's like she never says that because she's really gracious, but there's always that sense of you are not funny anymore, So
anymore.
Well, thanks for being here anyway, Chris.
Yeah. No, I'm thankful to be here.
The good thing is we still think you're funny. So
that's awesome.
Your jokes too.
I do like
years
new crowds.
Are still working.
Yeah. It's all about the new crowd for sure. Hey, are we going to say anything about the fact? So when I left town. Y'all brought in David Platt.
Yeah, when Lori
leaves town.
Hey, Chris Larsen,
we bring in Chris Larsen. I'm not saying. I'm just
what
saying.
You're saying.
Well, I mean, calling me up 15 minutes ago and asking me to be a part of this, I just want you to know, I'm glad you thought about me.
Yeah, we knew you'd be available, and we were right.
Exactly. We were right. Spring break, no kids.
Yeah, right.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Well, we are in a series on the life of Joseph, and as we discuss the life of Joseph, we're going to cover sort of the 30,000-foot view and really apply it. We've asked Chris. Chris is our men's ministry pastor here at the Bee Cave campus, and so and we asked him to come in and just kind of talk with Jeff and I about what we can learn as a man from the life of Joseph. And so I guess this is our manly episode. And we're going to just dig in and just pull out some threads and some themes, some things that Joseph, we see him struggle with, and some things that we see some victory in his life with. And so, I guess ladies can listen to this and maybe, do the old forward it to a man in their life.
That's usually how it works out. Right?
That's usually how it goes anyway, right? So here we go. Quite honestly, I don't even know when we're going to air this. Like people might have, we've only been up to 40, I guess 2, and we might air this later, but it doesn't really matter because it's the whole life of Joseph.
So we could say we've recently started this new series on Joseph. Hey, we recently wrapped this series on Joseph.
That's right.
Hey, happy July 4th.
That's right.
That's
right. Yeah,
whatever.
It doesn't matter.
We don't know.
Exactly.
Let's find out.
Yeah, there we go. So I have like a list of things here, Chris, and I want to hear from kind of you how you would define it. So, what is the phrase in which we're after in this episode, or just generally speaking as a man of God in 2023? Do we want to be a Christ-centered man? Do we want to be a man after God's own heart? We've heard that phrase about David, a man who loves and leads well. So what kind of language do you use as you disciple men at Austin Ridge?
Yeah, so when I talk about guys specifically, there's a phrase that I use a lot that a lot of guys around Austin Ridge have probably heard, in that men will do everything they can to become experts in their field, but they're perfectly content to remain amateurs in their faith and in their family. And so the idea behind that is like if a guy wants to excel at work and to really develop his own business acumen or the ability to be able to excel in business, then he'll go to conferences, he will stay up late at night, he'll work long hours, he'll try to figure out what does it take to put this thing together to make me the best in this area. And I'm going to read books on it, good to great. I'm going to be like looking for all of these opportunities to be able to advance in my company. And when it comes to my faith and when it comes to my family, I'm just going to let that happen because that happens by osmosis. That happens like just on day in and day out, just miracles happening and me all of a sudden developing and understanding what it looks like to become a godly man. And so I try to figure out how do we make and help guys become much more intentional in developing in their areas of faith or developing in leading their families well.
Yeah.
They oftentimes will simply let the wife lead the family. It's like, you take care of all the stuff in the home, you take care of all the stuff with the kids, and I'll show up, and I will. If you need a heavy in there to come in and exact discipline, then I'll be the person who does that. If you want to make sure we all go to church, okay, great. I'll drive and get us there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'll let you take care of the faith. I'll let you take care of the family.
Yeah.
I'll focus on work. I'll make sure that we have a comfortable home and a comfortable life. And
Yeah, that's good. And this is for everyone at the table, but let's go a little deeper into what it means to be an expert in our faith as opposed to the workplace. Like what are some tangible things? What does God desire for manhood? Biblical manhood. What are some things that we should do? What are some things we should think about? What is it? What's the target?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote that down just to ask you, Chris. Like, what are some examples for yourself as a man? Like, outside of being a professional Christian, like how have you followed Jesus effectively over decades now?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it translates into what I call a constant awareness of God's presence in every area of life. That God is not only present in every area. That's not designed necessarily to be oh my gosh, you got to watch out and be on my best behavior because God's everywhere. It is the recognition that God is invested and involved in every area of my life as well. And so that means that everything from my health to my vacations to what I do with my off time when I'm, trying to wind down from a hard or busy day. It's like I want to make sure that I am aware that God is coming alongside me. Talking about the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit comes alongside us, right? It's in us, but it also comes alongside us to enable us to live the kind of life that honors God, live the kind of life that pleases God, but more than anything else, to be able to live the kind of life that reflects my relationship with God is more than just simply a 9-to-5 thing. You'd mentioned professional Christian, right? As a pastor, it's like the joke is always,
I'm literally paid to think about this for at least 8 hours
exactly.
a day.
I tell guys, it's like I get paid to be good. You guys are good for nothing. And so to have this idea that it's like I have a job that says you should reach out to people. I have a job that says you should study the Bible. I have a job that says, as a part of my job description. And the danger for pastors is that we can always look at that as a job. And so then once I clock out at the end of the day, it's like I don't think about God. I don't think about the rest of the kingdom. I don't think about anything else that has anything to do with my relationship with God. And I kind of use that as decompressed time.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that too. One of the ways I've started talking about that with different guys that I'm spending time with is I think we've done a disservice, and around the table we still do this. I'm not calling anybody out. But when we say, hey, in your orders of priority, like your relationship with Christ is number one, and then your family, and then your job, and then your, whatever kind of thing. It's like, well, what if we've been saying it wrong? Because what you just described is you have all these things, and Christ runs, your relationship with Christ should run through all these things. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like we tend to rank them in order, but like the Jesus piece of our life, which should be the primary driver, how is that driving me at work? How is that driving me? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's just a little shift in perspective.
Yeah, because I talk about the fruit of the Spirit, just finished a Bible study on the fruit of the Spirit, and we talked through the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so the idea would be that is almost not a litmus test, but it is almost how am I doing in my relationships? How am I doing in my job? How am I doing in the rest of the world that I work and live in? And are these attributes of the Spirit-controlled life, because it's the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of Chris. So are these attributes of the Spirit-controlled life becoming more and more consistent in me so that I'm known more for the way I am peaceful in stressful times. I'm known more for the way I'm joyful in difficult times, where I have patience in times that ultimately drive me crazy, right?
Or do I have more patience at home than I do at work, or vice versa?
Well, it's usually vice versa for a lot of folks, right?
Yeah.
At work, I have all these rules and regulations that I run by, and I want to put my best foot forward. And I was talking with our guys about how the fruit of the Spirit is something that we tend to exhibit well whenever we're out in public or whenever we're at work or whenever with other people. The people that we struggle with exhibiting that fruit with the most, it's the people that we say we love the most. Right.
Yeah, because they probably won't fire us.
Right, exactly right. I mean, they're not going to quit.
Most likely, yeah.
Right? Most of them won't quit. Right.
No, this is good. And I think it actually, this whole time we've really been talking about, I think, an attribute that we see in Joseph's life, or something that is highlighted in the scriptures about Joseph's life. And that is, 4 times in Genesis 39, it says the Lord was with Joseph. And it's almost like this reminder. So in one setting, he was in the Potiphar's house with the temptation of Potiphar's wife. And then when he gets moved into the prison, he kind of has this favor with the prison innkeeper. And it said twice there that the Lord was with Joseph and gave him favor. And so this idea for men, I think, you said it before, Chris, but like men just want to be told what to do and how to do it. Whereas Joseph really gave this example of a life with, and what you've been talking about so far with the Holy Spirit. Obviously here, if the Lord was with him, the presence of the Lord was with Joseph.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a subtle thing that we oftentimes, we can read it into the scripture. Sometimes we do that, our presuppositions, and particularly New Testament and 21st century presuppositions, right? It's like, here's what it looks like for Joseph. The Lord was with him. So therefore, Joseph probably in that moment felt like, man, the Lord's presence is here in prison with me.
Right,
and the reality is that, we have Moses telling us, hey, this is what was the experience for Joseph, that while Joseph was actually feeling like probably abandoned, feeling like I got mistreated, feeling like everything seems to be going wrong in my life right now, from my family relationships all the way down to my job and then into prison, and then people who I was supposed to be helping and they were supposed to help me. And so you have all of the situations happening, but from the grand narrator standpoint, Moses is writing, he says, but God was with him, even in the prison, even in the midst of the difficulties, even in the midst. And I think for a lot of guys, the struggle oftentimes is when we say that God is with us all the time, that means I should feel the presence of God with me all the time. Right? It's feeling based as opposed to
So how do we
reality?
How do we navigate that? As a truth to be known that God will never leave us or forsake us, in the midst of whatever season that Joseph was going through. Because we've documented in this series that there was lots of, the whole series is called The Highs and Lows of the Life of Joseph. And so we see Joseph in the highs experiencing a level of pride. And in the lows, I don't think it really talks a lot about despair, but you imagine that what we don't see in here and what isn't written by Moses is maybe how Joseph was experiencing his lows, and it could have felt like, to your point, low.
Yeah, I mean, because you factor in, we get the highlight reel, essentially. And, you have these phrases in here, and then 2 years later. And then, it's like, oh my gosh, 2 years. That you were sitting there in prison forgotten, but the Lord is with you the whole time. And I feel like a lot of times we think that all of our life every day should be the highlight reel. Like I'm going through a season where everything I should experience the felt presence of the Lord with me, as opposed to being able to rest in the knowledge that irrespective of what I'm going through or what I'm feeling in this moment, that the Lord is with me, that he's always present with me.
And I think, since we are New Testament people, like I said, if you jump over to Hebrews 11, just before the author gets to the list of Old Testament saints and how they lived out this faith, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So if you read that back into Joseph's life, I mean, like what you were just saying, like there was something he would hope in the midst of a hopeless situation, that kind of thing. But that's what God counted as faith, and that's what he would have probably have attributed to Joseph as some kind of righteousness. Even though it looked different than maybe we're declared righteous now, that's what he would have been declared righteous from.
For sure. And again, I think, Chris, I don't want to do what you, maybe said that we sometimes do and we shouldn't do. But I wrote down the word contentment. And whether or not, I guess, Joseph exemplified contentment or not, because we don't know. I mean, we don't know his attitude really through all of this. However, it helps me see, like, you know what, like there is this like faithful tone
Yeah.
in this story.
Yeah.
Because like the God was with him, and then he's there and he's in the low, and then he gets promoted to the high, and he's kind of ready for action.
Right.
Like, I mean, he's ruling over the prison, then he's ruling over Potiphar's house,
Right.
then he eventually rules over Egypt. I mean, so there was this readiness and just the contentment of, I bet when he was in his mid-20s, he wanted to jump to his 40s when he was overseeing Israel. I mean, Egypt.
Right.
And so,
But he wouldn't have been able to do that if he
That's
had
right.
not had probably what he would consider to be the lowly position.
And I guess that's
of
where
just being,
definitely.
it's like I'm the head prisoner.
yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like, but I'm still in
Congratulations.
prison.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, what do you do with the circumstances that you find yourself in?
Yeah.
How do you make the most of those?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you honor God through it?
Because I hear a lot from men, a discontentment in the season of life they are in their work.
Yeah, for sure.
Or even their family's life.
Or
you
their
know?
lack of work.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I'm unemployed right now.
Yeah.
Well, and a feeling discontentment, I mean, not to throw it completely out, is not bad.
No, it's
I mean,
not.
if it's a redemptive thing,
Yeah, it's
like
good.
what is this going to move me towards? Is it going
Right.
to move me towards despair? Is it going to move me towards seeking
Yeah.
the Lord on what's next? Is it
Yeah.
going to push me towards community and asking
Yeah.
the people that are close to me what they're seeing,
Yeah, that's
what
good.
circumstances? So it's not bad. It's
Yeah.
how we act on it.
That's
that
right.
Can be
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
Well,
that's really good.
I could liken it to just something as simple as, I have good confidence that I can work on my vehicle right now, only because of the fact that I have had tons of experience throughout my years, pre-YouTube videos,
Right.
of sometimes trial and error. It's like,
Like
hey, I'm-
having a few extra
like
screws left
having a
over
few
when
extra
you're done.
screws left over, or having a bolt that you're thinking you're turning the right way and you're not, and it shears off.
Can I give a little rabbit trail?
Yeah.
Remember how I talked about I can't change a tire, and I just have friends that can change tires? Chris has actually changed one of my tires before.
Hey, can you come? I'm parked over on the side of the road. Can you come help me?
Anyway.
Yeah. No, but I mean,
So much I want to unpack there, but I'm not gonna.
But I mean, that's, a lot of what I'm able to do now is because of the experience that I've had through the years of probably doing it poorly and then finally developing and consistently sticking with it to the point now where I'm able to do it. A lot of guys try out, okay, I'm going to try this Bible thing. I don't understand it, so I guess I'm not made for it. Maybe it's not my ability to be able to understand, and that's just not for me. Must be for these other guys, right? I teach the Bible now, but I used to teach really, really poorly.
Imagine that.
Whether I'm teaching poorly now or not, it's up to you. But I used to teach really, really poorly. It's like I remember my first message when I was working in the youth ministry underneath a youth pastor, and I was just a volunteer, and he was like, hey, would you like to lead this Bible study? And I was like, sure. And so I had prepared, written down, word for word, probably what I thought in my mind was going to be the best Bible study the students had ever heard. It's going to be 15 minutes long. That's the time limit he gave me. And I'm up there, and I get through it, and it's like 7 minutes, and I'm done. Right? And I'm just reading it, staring at the words, just kind of working through it, just trying to figure out how to get this out. And, nervous the whole time. And so I'm just, you finally get to a place where you go, okay, that was terrible. Now, what can I learn? What can I do better? How can I improve on this? How can I develop in this? And then over a period of time, a long period of time, you get to where you're proficient at it.
Yeah.
And it becomes natural for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really good. I think I want to go back a little bit to something, Jeff, you said when I said I thought the word the contentment, and you said, hey, discontentment isn't bad. I think that is so helpful for people because I think what they want sometimes to hear or to learn is a list or something that's black and white.
Sure.
Just tell me what, but actually that could be damaging. For example, you must be content in whatever the hand you've been dealt. And it's like, well, no, actually, sometimes it just stinks.
Yeah.
Now, is the Lord still at work in it?
Sure.
Yes. And is he still sovereign? Yes.
Yeah.
And is he still with you? We've already established that. But it's okay. It's like what you do with it. I like what you
Well,
said
and then
there.
even, I'm thinking of, let's use Chris's example of being a poor teacher or a great teacher, depending on how he walked away from that.
Sure.
He might have walked away from that going, I've never seen my lead pastor be able to knock that out in 7 minutes. I must be really good.
Right.
I'm efficient.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So it can be a sign of pride if you're not discontent
Yeah.
with some things,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because it'd be very easy for a young guy to just say, people patted me on the back, so it must
Yeah.
be killer. I'm just going to be, and then just kind of shut yourself off from feedback kind of thing. But there's also the truth of that godliness with contentment is great gain. Like, we also know that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
is it possible to be content and discontent at the same time?
Yeah.
And content probably meaning more of a posture of trust, posture
that's
of,
good.
I'm not in control of this, God is.
Yeah.
I may not like it, but I'm going to trust him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And I think that's sometimes the danger.
But also working to change your circumstances, because there's the period of waiting.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just, all that's true. It's not a black or white
That's right.
thing. It's great.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and back to Joseph, it's like there's a season where he's growing and figuring out what it looks like to honor God in the midst of hard times.
Right.
And he doesn't know that until he's gone through hard times. And so in order for us to be people who represent God well in a difficult world, we have to go through difficulties. We have to go through seasons where the money doesn't end up at the end of the month, and it's like, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. And we have to go through seasons where it's like, okay, I don't know what to do with this sickness on my family or in me. I don't know what to do with this, and so therefore now I'm bringing this to God. Because, I mean, all through the scriptures you find, people making altars to God, and you were talking about Abraham and Isaac and him offering his son, and then whenever God provided the ram in the thicket, and he said, name this altar Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide.
Yeah.
Right? Well, he probably knew that God was a provider prior to that, but he came to really experience God as a provider through that circumstance that he probably thought was the most difficult thing he'd ever go through in his life.
Yeah, it's really good.
That was really good. I think something that I heard also, and when you guys were speaking and talking about seasons and sort of just that maybe that trust in the midst of discontentment along the way, was that Joseph. We talked about Joseph in previous episodes about his pride when he was 17 years old, and it's really interesting though. I'll just say this. As I mentioned that, a lot of I don't want to call it lazy writing, but I've seen a lot of writing basically that Joseph did no wrong ever. Right.
Sure.
Like when they read through their lens as they study, they're like, well, he was just a poor victim of his brothers.
Right.
And it's like, did you read what Joseph did to his brothers?
Now, it didn't warrant what they did, so they're not completely wrong. Hey, if somebody gives you an unfavorable forecast,
sell him
don't
into
throw
slavery.
Like just in general.
Yeah,
It's a good rule for living, I feel like.
And
Don't
then
throw him into a pit and plot to kill him. And then sell him to slavery.
Make sure it's a right size response. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
well said. But
But that's exactly it. I do see that a lot, because a lot of pastors sometimes they talk about how, because I've heard this from the pulpit at times, where guys would say Joseph is the only character in probably Old Testament that there's nothing negative ever said about him.
And that actually finishes well. I mean, he's one of the
he did
men in
finish.
Scripture period that finishes well.
Finishes well, exactly.
Yeah.
But I've heard it too.
Yeah, and so I guess this conversation is, this whole being a man and being, confident and being, there's some pride, even towards the end there, where he, his brothers come to him, and so, this whole tug of war and tension between feeling a sense of pride and confidence and whatever, versus like leading with humility and leading in being with God, as opposed to for Him. So talk about like this tension of like competence is a big issue, is a big deal in our world, in our culture, and men are supposed to present competent, and yet having a confidence in God and not self.
So some of that is having an awareness of yourself and what you're experiencing, what you're going through. I remember early on, whenever I first became a believer at 21 years old, and I realized I had an anger issue, and I realized it from punching a door that I thought was hollow, and it turned out it was a solid door. Yeah. And so I broke a knuckle on my left hand, and it was, it was that was the moment where I go, man, I probably ought to get this under control. And so through prayer and reading the scriptures and just, getting to this place where I feel like I really have this under control now. I'm no longer an angry person. And then I had kids. And all of a sudden,
Wait a second. Are you about to say the kids brought out?
I'm just saying.
Worse than you?
Now, this is going to be something that probably is controversial for people who are listening to it. No, it was one of those moments where it's like, oh, these are buttons I didn't even know I had.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where there's zero control over this child, right? It's like they're crying. I can't get them to stop crying. And it's like all of a sudden I could find these places in my life that I thought I had mastered this area that it's like, no, I still need to grow in this area. And then it becomes, oh, now I'm angry about injustice, or now I'm angry about, and so it's like, I need to continue to grow. So having that awareness that I'm always a work in progress, that I'm always going to be growing and hopefully maturing in these areas. You know, as long as I'm better this year than I was last year, next year, hopefully I'm better than I am today, that I'm continuing to grow and mature. And so we oftentimes will see this as it's a project that there's a start time and there's a finish time, and I'll get to a place where I'm done, maturing, growing. You know, some people throughout history, you know, that I have attained this.
I've come as far as I need to.
This is as far as I'm going to get, right?
Yeah.
I've basically gotten to this place of perfection in this life, and now I'm going to continue on and, you know, just, I guess, be a holy person for the rest of my life. As opposed to, it's like, no, God is always showing me areas where I go, wow, okay, yeah, I struggle in that still. Or I was doing really well, but I let it slide. Right? And so now I'm at a place where I have to re-engage that area and be intentional and mature in that.
Yeah, it's really good, because I think for me, I've been in places where I felt stuck. Or like, this is it. This is as quote unquote mature as I get. You know, because I keep hitting my head against the wall here in this area of spiritual life, and yet the Lord is so faithful. Going back to your previous point, like maybe Joseph didn't realize the Lord was with him, but like the promise was that he was with them. And I think I felt that over my time. I was like, where are you, Lord? And then he helps me break through a spiritual barrier or whatever. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, that's the thing I think with Joseph that's unique, is there's an arc to where he starts and to where he finishes. Where if you look at David, I mean, there are probably a couple different arcs. For instance, so like he starts off pretty good and then he screws up. And then he gets going pretty good again, kind of thing. You know, whereas Solomon starts pretty good, he kind of just keeps going downhill.
Constant decline.
Whereas Joseph's like the first thing we see about him, young, impetuous, typical teenage guy. You know, and actually,
who had a very unique situation.
There was nothing he said that was actually wrong. It was all about timing, all about tone, all about all those kind of things. Well, those are things that hopefully a somewhat self-aware man will continue to experience about himself in the course of life. You know, see having kids, see getting married, see different things that are going to give you plenty of opportunity to have someone reflect back to you how they're experiencing you, kind of thing. But I think that's why Joseph teaches so well for men, is because you see that continual improvement on something we saw maybe not great prior.
And then you find a situation where it's like he's going through having success in positions where he has no authority. Then finally given authority.
That's right.
Then what do you do with that authority? And how do you treat your brothers now that you are the guy, right? And every one of them are bowing down to you as the dream that you had when you were a teenager. It's like, now what are you going to do? How are you going to? And I think there were seasons where you'd see Joseph begin to break down and cry. He had to go to the other room. It's like, I think that was the Holy Spirit of God just kind of working in his life, going, "Hey, dude, you're treating your brothers like crap right now." And so, this is something that you have an opportunity to grow and develop in. And, you know, I think that's the thing. It's like always growing, always moving forward.
In the life and the story of Joseph, we see lots of temptations that we men still face today. So the temptation of power, the temptation to be stuck in a rut of depression, and I think we probably will kind of end with a final topic of what happened and what took place in Genesis 39 with Potiphar's wife. Because I think that is something that, you know, a lot of men, you know, struggle with temptation in variety capacity, whether it be with our phone or online or in the workplace or on business trips. You know, so on and so forth. And so, Chris, I've actually come to you as I am about to raise, you know, 3 boys as they enter their teen years. And I said, you know, how do you navigate just being wired by God to desire, and to have hormones and to, and yet, you know, pursue purity. And then I've taught men too, just because a ring shows up on your finger doesn't mean those things, you know, magically disappear.
Right.
And we have Joseph in this situation who is there and given an opportunity, you know, and by Potiphar's wife, and then yet has the strength, the wherewithal, the self-control. The self-control is what you've kind of encouraged me with as I raise my children, my sons. but what happened here, and what do we encourage our men of our church with in this area?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the passage, and this is the end of verse 6 in Genesis 39, where it says that Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, right? So he's a good-looking dude. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, now I think this is the secret, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except for you." Now, this is immediately, for me, it just kind of rings back to the Garden of Eden. You can have eat of any tree.
That's good.
Right? Except for this one. And Potiphar's like, "Hey, you have free reign over my house, except for my wife."
Yeah.
And as a result of that, because you're his wife, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin? And I love this phrase, against God, not against my master.
That's good.
Right? It's not against him.
Yeah.
It's against God. And so I think because Joseph has this perspective in his relationship with God and his recognition of God's authority over his life, that the way that I glorify God is recognizing that everything that I do is out of a reflection of that relationship. And whenever I choose to engage in something that is counter to that, it's not that I'm sinning against my wife. It's not that I'm sinning against her husband. I am sinning against God. That was David's comment, right? Against you and you alone have I sinned.
Yeah, that's good.
It's that recognition, I think. And I think most guys are weighing out the consequences based upon, will I be found out? Will someone else, will my wife figure this out? Will my boss figure this out? Will that woman's husband figure this out? And doesn't God want me to be happy? You know, that whole thing. And instead of going, no, what exactly has God said about this? What has God determined in this particular situation is the thing that will honor him? Because if my focus is on the world around me, then all I'm going to do is try to elevate a little bit higher than the world around me. But whenever my focus is on God, and this is about being a godly man, I'm becoming more aware of his presence throughout every circumstance and every area of my life. That means in this area, it's like God is present with me. I want to make sure I'm living in a right relationship with God. Because we've done the thing, kind of the guilt trip. You know, God is with you in the dark and with your computer open. And it's like, oh, is that supposed to mean something?
Right.
It's like, because unless you care about God or have that you love God or you want to honor God, that doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think this is just an area where I just love the motivator that you just described, that is a relationship with God as opposed to consequences. You know, and I think consequences are not a great motivator.
Well, especially in America today. I mean, you know, if you could be killed for doing something back in the day, right, or thrown back into prison, you know, for Joseph's sake here, even for the accusation. Or parts around the world where it's like you can actually be killed for doing something that we would consider to be, you know, a sin, as opposed to today in America where it seems like, oh, you can become president, right? Or you can still. It doesn't affect your work, so you can still move on up in your company. You can still have great success in the United States, regardless of what your quote unquote social life looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jeff. Earlier you mentioned the list of things, and I think it might be a both and, or you can use the tool in either way. But I think that's why, you know, when I counsel, I start with the relationship with God, how you're doing there. And I guess you can almost, instead of making it a linear line, you can make it like a hub, you know, where a wheel, where like you get the hub right, the relationship with the Lord right, because it impacts the going out from the hub all around it.
And there's as Chris was talking, I'm thinking of like married men, obviously, but I think this would apply to any man, depending on the category we're talking about, is I'm thinking like when you're young, you're first married, you might say no to a particular thing because you love your wife so much. That doesn't sustain you year 25.
Right.
Yeah. Like at a certain point, it's about the covenant, the commitment that you've made to her that's going to keep you regardless of how you feel. That kind of thing. And I think that's true with our relationship with the Lord. Where
Yeah.
Joseph, it didn't matter how he felt.
Yeah.
We saw that at some point there some commitment happened with him that I will honor God. I will not make this great sin against God. Like that had happened before he found himself there.
Right.
And so therefore he could act in line with what he had already decided to do. But that's based on commitment, not how you feel. Because in that moment, he didn't probably feel whatever you should feel.
And he could
strong enough.
easily in that moment say, I deserve this.
That's right.
I've gone through so much. I've experienced so much pain and hardship and difficulty. I deserve this. She probably, obviously, is not going to tell her husband.
Right.
And so therefore, I deserve this.
Yeah,
Sure.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Well, as we kind of wrap up the conversation, I just want to give all of us an opportunity to just say, hey, like if you have, a couple minutes with a guy, like what is your pastoral encouragements? And I know that's a really broad kind of, I guess with the overview or the overlay of the story of Joseph, what and how would you encourage a man who's listening to this today?
Yeah, I would probably start with, what does it look like for you to be in a love relationship with God? And what I mean by that is that you genuinely love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That every area of your life is designed as an expression to loving God. And if you just were able to sit down and write through, here's all of the different things that I participate in. I am a husband. I am a father. I am a son. If your parents are still here, and I am an employee, I am a boss, I'm a supervisor, I'm a coach, and you start making a list of everything that you do, like given throughout the whole day. I'm an individual who likes golf, or whatever the case may be. And you start looking at that whole list and say, is God being exalted and honored in every one of these areas? Not do I acknowledge God, right, in each of these areas. But is he being exalted and honored in the way I treat my kids, in the way that I treat my wife, in the way that I treat my boss, or the way I treat my employees? Is everything in each of these areas, you talk about looking at how the whole part of your life, it's every area of my life being impacted by a recognition of God's sovereignty and of his rule and his reign, but also his genuine love for me and my genuine love for him.
Yeah.
Because I will only operate out of fear for so long.
Right.
But I will do anything for love.
Yeah.
But I won't do that.
You won't do that?
Nice.
I was waiting for it.
A little meatloaf there.
Yeah. Man, what was it? Pastoral encouragement?
Yeah, but just...
Yeah, I'm thinking, man, if you're a guy and haven't gone to James 1 and 2 recently, or 2 Peter 1 recently, like you should go there.
Yeah.
Like I think so much of that forms a backdrop of the positive elements we see in Joseph's life that, the faith without works is dead. Well, how did, especially in the Old Testament, how did you prove faith? Because there wasn't like a Jesus aspect to what they're doing yet. Well, they acted in line with what they believed, so we see that with him.
Right.
But James tells us that in a New Testament way that might make a little more sense. But and then 2 Peter, I come to this probably too much on the podcast, but his divine power, 2 Peter 1, starting verse 3, his divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness in his word, by his spirit and community, through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence, by which he has granted to us his precious, very great promises, and so on. And then it goes on, make every effort to supplement your faith. It starts with faith, but then add to it virtue and, lost my place, virtue, knowledge, self-control, steadfastness, godliness, brotherly affection, love. Like he was saying, the fruit of the Spirit earlier, like you can use those almost as a diagnostic. I'm struggling in this area, or I've failed in an area, or I'm avoiding an area, things like that. I think those kinds of lists help us, just as Christ followers, but especially as men. Like a lot of times we're not good at self-reflection, just in general, because that takes emotional energy and we don't want to do that. But I think we're called to that. And then when we do an honest reflection, or somebody gives us some honest reflective material that we can act upon, sometimes a friend or, confidant or whatever, is, what do we do with it? Are we humble enough to actually take something from that and work on the next thing?
Right.
Because we're always preparing for the next obedience. If we're not preparing for it, our only option is disobedience, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you've mentioned this before. It's like the disciplines are so critical for this, because if I'm not regularly in God's word, if I'm not regularly praying, if I'm not regularly, even evaluating and trying to figure out where I am on either the fruit of the Spirit or the portion you just read, it's like I want to make sure that I'm continually growing and maturing. But the only way I'm going to do that is if I become aware of the presence of God in every area of my life, and if I can become more consistent in these areas day over day, month after month, year after year. So that I have a longevity that comes with it.
Yeah, and that was going to be, kind of what I was going to say is it's sort of like we treat it in other areas of life, like in our diet, what we eat. You know, like if you eat whatever you want, you know, you're not going to be healthy.
Right.
If you don't exercise, you know, like you are kind of what your belief drives your action, and so if you believe that a relationship with God is worth it, and you do the disciplines and you invest in that relationship, then there is longevity that comes with that, a faithful walk in the
which
right
goes
direction.
right back to where we started earlier, and you know, men will work to become experts. You know,
right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really good. Well, if you have questions, or if you just really feel like you want to talk to somebody about some of the things we talked about in this episode, you can reach out to equip@austinridge.org. You can find any of the three of us here on a Sunday
call
morning.
Chris. What's your number?
Yeah, that's right. What's your cell phone number?
Yeah, you can call me at 555-5555.
Yeah, so please don't be afraid to reach out. And if you have any questions, please do so. So thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.